In 1860s, a few American states didn't want to be part of the United States anymore. They were angry about the government trying to stop the spread of slavery, so they left and formed their own country, the Confederacy. The United States didn't accept that, and in 1861, after the Confederates attacked a Union fort, then the American Civil War began. So, what would happen if a single modern tank, let's say an M1 Abrams, was dropped into the middle of the American Civil War? No support, no crew rotation, just one fully operational modern tank dropped into 1863 America. How much of a difference would it make? Could it win the war on its own, or would it eventually break down and be abandoned, surrounded by confused soldiers with muskets? First, the machine itself. The M1 Abrams is one of the most advanced main battle tanks in the world. It's heavily armored, incredibly fast for its size, and armed with a 120mm smoothbore cannon. It also carries a 50 caliber machine gun and two 7.62mm machine guns for close defense. It runs on a gas turbine engine, essentially a jet engine, and burns through fuel quickly. Fully fueled, it can travel around 265 miles on roads and about 90 to 100 miles off-road. It's a technological monster, weighing over 60 tons. In the context of the Civil War, that's science fiction. Soldiers in the 1860s were used to horses, muzzle-loading rifles, and black powder artillery. Even ironclads on the water were still experimental and slow. So a tank like this wouldn't just be powerful, it would be terrifying. So how much could one tank actually do before it becomes useless? Let's say the tank arrives in 1863, in the middle of the war. It's placed on the Union side. It comes with a full loadout of ammo, a trained crew of 4, and a reserve of fuel in sealed containers, enough for maybe 2 to 3 full refuels. That gives us a total range of roughly 500 to 600 miles of mixed terrain. The tank would be an unmatched shock weapon. Confederate forces would have no way to destroy it. Their best weapons, artillery or early rifles, might damage exposed crew members or tracks at close range, but the armor would shrug off almost everything. Even direct cannon fire would barely scratch it unless it hit a weak spot. In its first engagements, the Abrams would devastate enemy positions. Confederate lines would break instantly. Infantry wouldn't understand what they were facing. It would easily destroy entrenched positions, artillery batteries, and supply lines. Imagine a Confederate artillery crew setting up behind a ridge thinking they're safe. Then they hear it. A low mechanical growl, unlike anything they've ever known. A split second later, a thunderous boom echoes across the valley. The ridge explodes in flame and dust. Horses scream, men scatter. From the smoke rolls a massive armored beast belching black exhaust and fire. It doesn't march, it dominates. Morale would collapse. Word would spread of an invincible metal beast that roars like a dragon and spits fire with precision. Entire units might surrender without a fight, but it wouldn't take long for the tank's limits to show. The biggest problem is logistics. A modern tank relies on a supply chain that doesn't exist in 1863. There's no diesel or jet fuel, no spare parts, and no tools to service its complex systems. If it breaks down, and it will, it's over. Even a broken track would sideline it. Nobody in that era could fix it. Same for ammo. Once it uses up its 120mm rounds and 50 cal ammo, it becomes just a very heavy armored vehicle. It could still crush cavalry and wagons, sure, but it wouldn't be a game changer anymore. Fuel is the biggest limiter. Even if the crew rationed usage carefully, it's hard to imagine the tank operating more than a few weeks under combat conditions before running dry. Despite its limited operational time, the Abrams would have a massive psychological effect. It could turn the tide in a major battle, maybe Gettysburg or Chattanooga, by punching through Confederate lines with zero resistance. That alone could be enough to break momentum, force retreats, or demoralize entire divisions. Lincoln's generals wouldn't fully understand what they had, but they'd use it wherever possible. So even though it wouldn't win the war on its own, the tank would become the centerpiece of Union operations for weeks, maybe months. If used wisely, it could change the pace of the war dramatically, accelerating Union victories, shortening sieges, and giving the North a strategic upper hand. If the Union can use the tank for a few weeks, maybe the Confederacy would start adapting. Soldiers would dig trenches, set up decoys, or lure the tank into muddy or forested terrain. Guerrilla tactics would become more common, and when the tank finally stopped, either out of fuel or due to mechanical failure, it would become a trophy. Confederate engineers might try to study it, but without industrial knowledge, It would just confuse them. Meanwhile, Union commanders might realize too late that the weapon was temporary. Over-reliance on it could backfire once it's gone. So one modern tank could not win the Civil War alone, but it could shorten it. It could win key battles, reshape strategies, and devastate Confederate morale. If deployed strategically, maybe in the Western Theater or as a breakthrough weapon in Virginia, it could allow the Union to take major territory faster, possibly saving tens of thousands of lives. But in the long run, technology without support is limited. The tank would break down, ammo would run out, and the war would go on, changed but not erased.